Hi, I am so excited to have Meredith Leigh and Kirsten Shockey here with us. And without further ado, they are from the Fermentation School. They are both authors in their own right. Be sure to check out their bios on the website. But I'm going to turn it over to them for what they're going to do for us today. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi,
Thanks
thanks
for
for
having
having us.
us. So we're going to bounce back and forth a little bit to start. So I'm Meredith Leigh, and I am an author. My books are the Ethical Meat Handbook and the book Pure Charcuterie. And my specialty, even though I work across the food system in all kinds of consulting, recipe development, I work on carbon offsets. I do lots of different things. But my particular specialty in the realm of culinary and fermentation is around meat and animal products. I am co-conspirator with Kirsten today through our business, The Fermentation School, which is an online platform for people to learn all different kinds of fermentation and sort of think about fermentation across the food system. And we feature female educators and female identifying educators trying to make a space not only for learning, but also for those people, women who have knowledge to share it and get paid to do so. So we're really excited to bring you fermentation topics for the Proactive Health Summit.
And I am Kirsten Shockey, and I have worked in the world of preservation mostly for over 20 years, focusing mostly on fermentation. I would say vegetables is sort of my first love, but we go all over the place to cider, vinegar, Asian ferments, and I enjoy traveling around the world to teach people to ferment. My sort of secret goal is a jar of sauerkraut on everybody's counter. And I'm coming to you from the mountains of Southern Oregon. And Dawn is still showing books.
There are a few.
So
I love books.
Yes, books are gold, right? You can go back again and again and again. And I'm glad you actually have those copies, Dawn, because all of my copies are like bent and like splattered from all the times that I use them. So you have nice, pretty copies. That's good. So basically, kind of the reason we're here in our path is basically trying to create a community of people who share education and empowerment about fermented foods, but not only fermenting foods, but making your own fermented foods at home. And we feel like that is such an important thing because obviously there's a lot of growing research about the benefit of fermented foods in the diet, but there's a lot of mixed messages. There's a lot of hidden ingredients sometimes in like store-bought fermented foods. And so there can be a lot of loss of empowerment or like certainty as you go down that path of consuming fermented foods on a regular basis. Like, am I really getting this probiotic benefit? Am I getting these anti-inflammatory properties that are promised through fermented foods? And the cool thing about fermentation is it's a super ancient practice that has been owned by people, regular people, under-resourced people since its inception. And so we really want to keep that ethic alive in fermentation at the Fermentation School. We want to empower people to understand that fermentation is really doable on the home scale. You don't have to do it all, but taking on some practice that you like, something that you really like to eat, and getting started that way is a really good way to just know that you're getting super nutrition, super flavor into your diet. And so we're going to cover a few reasons why that's like an extra assurance. Basically, I kind of touched on it before, pure ingredients and processing. Like a lot of times you're not going to have transparency on like where the cabbage came from in the sauerkraut that you buy at the store. Or when it comes to meat specifically, we know there's a lot of controversy about the way animals are treated in certain agricultural systems. and certain ingredients and products like nitrates, which we'll talk about later, that some consumers are like, oh, I just don't know what the effects of this are, and I want to feel like I have more control and understanding. We're going to touch on some of that later, but making your foods yourself is a way for you to source in a way that's really transparent to you and feels good to you, and supportive of your like local food shed, which we know is super important, and also allows you to ensure that the ingredients involved in that product are going to be in line with what your standards are for your family. The other thing is just like nutrient density. You know, we are learning more and more, and it depends on where you are with this. Like you may just be at the stage where you're like, okay, I know I need to replace super processed foods with whole foods, and that is fine. And sometimes when we're there, all we can do is just get our hands on whole foods, and it doesn't matter where they come from, and that is a-okay. The next step, though, inevitably is always starting to think about, like, what is the nutrient density of these foods? How actually life-giving is the whole food that I'm using in my products? And so the next step then becomes, how can I start to think about my sourcing to ensure that that nutrient density is really there. So making your own fermented foods is kind of like this awesome invitation into starting thinking about those different things and empowering yourself to really gain control over some of those questions and their answers. I know Kirsten has a few more.
So let's talk about that nutrient density. So what's super cool is you take this cabbage, right, and you eat it raw like this, and it's great and has lots of vitamins. But then you take that cabbage and you ferment it, and your nutrient density goes up. Your vitamin C goes up. You've got now B12 on board. You've got digestive enzymes that makes the whole business more bioavailable, which means your gut, your system is going to uptake those nutrients more. So I am in complete agreement, like, let's try to source as best as we can. But I also like to tell people that if you can only, source cabbages that are, commodity cabbages, when you add this layer of fermentation on, you're going to bring that nutrient density up. And I think that's super cool that you can take, something that's still a whole food and just amplify it through that. The other thing is, obviously, where fermented foods, and especially things like sauerkraut or kimchi or vegetables, have their most press about, I guess, if you will, is the probiotics. And the probiotics are super important. We evolved with live foods. We evolved with microbes coming and going and informing the microbes that are in our microbiome. And they're super important. So eating these foods raw is wonderful because it's another place to get those live microbes in your system. But what is also super cool right now is they're discovering that foods that have been somehow processed at some point in their processing that have even the dead microbes within them, or the microbes that die when you're cooking them or eating them, it's all okay. It's all good. Our system gets nutrients and different things from those dead microbes in their cell walls. I like to tell people that because I don't want people to feel like you need to eat these foods in only one way. The idea is that you start bringing them into your life and you enjoy them in whatever capacity that is. And I think
really, you're saying fermentation covers a lot of sins. It covers wherever your family standards. I love that you said that, Meredith, that where you set your family standards, because we're all going to draw those lines in different places. But you're saying wherever those lines are, we can cover the places that we want to slide with the fermentation.
Totally.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
I think like the other thing about those ghost biotics that Kirsten was talking about, those are the microbes that were at work in the food at one point, but either exploded or died. It's really fun to talk about if you ever want to get down into it. But they are also really responsible for the flavor experience of fermented foods. And so it's really cool. Like the thing about fermentation, especially fermenting things yourself, is that you're going to get flavor that you can't get anywhere else. And true, you can buy fermented products, and we'll talk about some good options for that later. But you really have the opportunity to get creative and set up really cool and unique flavor profiles for you, which is another thing that gives you the ability to tailor this to your family's taste. Like not everybody loves sour food. And that being said, like not all fermented food is sour food. So you might equate it in your mind with like, oh, sauerkraut. Well, I don't like sauerkraut, or I don't like kimchi. That's fine. Maybe you're going to be more likely to make something like a miso, or, get into making your own sandwich meat, which we're going to talk about later in the session and do a demo about. So don't get locked into your mind around, in order to do this well, I have to do it one way. There's like a real rainbow of opportunities for how to start getting that good food into your diet.
And when it comes to flavor, I mean, ultimately that's what we're talking about here, because you can tell yourself all day long something is good for you, but does that mean you're going to do it, or eat it, or grab it out of the refrigerator? So ultimately, these foods are delicious. You can, like Meredith said, you tailor it to what you love. If you love hot sauce, well, now all your hot sauces can be fermented, and you're splashing these probiotic, flavor bombs onto everything. Or you hate garlic, so let's not ever make kimchi with garlic in it. I mean, you do that, and different points of the fermentation are also going to give you different flavor aspects. So if you don't like that sour, just ferment it for a few days, and you're going to get sort of those half sour flavors. And it's really ultimately all about these foods tasting good, because then you will eat them, you will crave them, your family will crave them, and you won't even think about the fact that you're eating fermented foods anymore. It's just will become habit.
It's true, because the microbes train your body. They train your cravings.
My husband likes to say that he had a perfectly good sweet tooth, finely honed, and now he doesn't even like donuts, so the microbes are trained away from all his sugar cravings, and he's disappointed sometimes.
So are we ready to demo?
I think so.
Okay. So we thought it would be really cool to focus the demo around getting live or living foods into your lunch hour, because this is something that, like, I don't know, people think of fermented foods as like snacky foods or appetizer foods or garnish foods, and they're not really sure how to cook with them. And one of the things that is very, very mystifying and scary to people is meat. And so you've got Meat Girl here, and I'm ready to show you how accessible it can be to make your own sandwich meat. And before we get started, we're going to be doing you have a couple options. We're going to be doing a sandwich beef, and I'm going to talk to you about how to do a herb and salt cured roast beef at home, and then like a brined corned beef. So you can choose like whichever one you want to do. I'm going to personally make for you the corned beef, so you can kind of see how that goes. It's a little bit more complicated than the salt method, but then I'll also talk about the salt method, so you have a couple recipes to work with. But one of the reasons that this is so powerful and is going to unlock this huge realm for you is because, I mean, we all love cold cuts, right? I mean, if you don't, fine. But I mean, I'm sure like if you don't, maybe your kids do, or your spouse does, and you're maybe packing your lunch for the office, or you're packing your kids' lunch boxes in the morning, you're giving them tools to pack their own. And I know that going and like standing in the meat aisle and trying to pick out a cold cut that feels like really healthy, like everybody's scared of them, like we hear from the World Health Organization that they're going to give us cancer or whatever. Like we get all these messages that like sliced up meat is bad for us, but do we really know why? And so I'm like just going to break it down for you. It's not bad for you if you're using good ingredients and pure ingredients, but the problem comes when we start looking at like highly processed, packaged food from the store. Now, it's totally fine if that's what you have access to, or if that's what you're able to do. I buy brands like Applegate sometimes when I'm out of time, or I don't have the ability to give my family like a homemade cured meat, and that's fine. But when I do have the ability to make it myself, I always feel like 1000% better because I know exactly where that meat came from and I know exactly what those ingredients are. And the reason that this is especially helpful, I think, right now to people is because of the conversation about nitrates. If you haven't heard of nitrates, congratulations, you're like a special unicorn person that has like never dealt in this controversy. But if you have, you've probably got a lot of questions like, are nitrates bad for me? Are they going to give me cancer? Is all bacon therefore horrible? And so there's a lot of messages out there about this. And so one of the things to understand about nitrate is that it's a naturally occurring compound. It occurs in high amounts in vegetables, actually. So in leafy greens, in peppers, in beets, and it occurs most abundantly in nature in the stems of celery. So when you eat celery, you're consuming nitrite, which is a preservative compound, and it's been harnessed by the food industry for that reason. It's a very preservative compound, and the reason it's so powerful is because it prevents botulism. And botulism is like the most dangerous foodborne pathogen in preserved food. So you can imagine in the food industry, like once we started mass producing lots of different foods and selling them as shelf stable, nitrates were one of those things that were harnessed in order to create that preservative effect. And that's a really good thing because we don't want botulism. It's colorless, flavorless, odorless. We can't detect if it's in your food. If you happen to ingest even like a half micron of it, it will paralyze you from the waist up. So it's a serious business that we don't want to take lightly. But the one thing that isn't really being communicated about the nitrite situation is the nuance of it. Sodium nitrite itself is not something that you're going to eat by the spoonful. It's just not going to happen. You might eat it in celery, but it's in such small quantities that it's not having an effect on you. You will metabolize it pretty easily in your body and it will be fine. The issue is when foods that are processed with nitrite are then cooked to produce nitrosamine. So nitrosamine is a potent carcinogen. And so where this like push comes to shove in meat processing is meats that are cured with a nitrite, which is necessary in a lot of cases to inhibit that botulism, but then cooked, will have that nitrosamine in them. And the issue is that regulation requires all meat processors and specifically of ready-to-eat products like sandwich hams and bacon to use a nitrite product. So that could be a synthetic nitrite product, or it could be a naturally occurring celery juice extract or celery juice salt. But if you buy like an over-the-counter or whatever, like packaged ham or bacon, you are buying something that is absolutely cured with a nitrite. And I know you're going to say, but Meredith, I buy the thing that says uncured. But in the industry, we call that the big lie, because basically that is still cured with a nitrite in the meat industry. It's cured with celery juice extract, as I mentioned before. It's just a naturally occurring form of nitrite, but it still is being cured and cooked and forming nitrosamine. So it's really getting you to the same place, and it's not necessarily it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other, basically. But the good news is any product that's cooked at boiling point or higher for 20 minutes or more is going to kill any botulism. So if you make your cooked, ready-to-eat sliced deli meats at home or your own bacon at home, you're going to be cooking that product. Bacon is a cooked product. Ham is a cooked product. Roast beef is a cooked product. But you have the option, since you're not in a certified facility that is subject to the regulation of the government, you have the option of leaving that curing salt out. You can leave out that nitrite, and you can just use the power of kosher salt or sea salt to cure the food, and then you can use that cooking process to ensure food safety. So this is why I feel 1000% better when I'm making my own sandwich meats, because I'm not a purist. Sometimes I eat nitrosamine. Sometimes I wear mascara. I used to every once in a while drink a little bit of whiskey. Like, we're not living in a pure world, So I don't want you to freak out about consuming a little bit of nitrosamine here and there. But I do think it's really empowering to know, like, oh, hey, this is helpful business. And if I want to cure a piece of meat on the home scale and give my kids a pure thing, or give my spouse or myself a pure thing, I can do so. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the demo. And what I have, I'm going to put my apron on. You can edit out this part, right?
Sure.
So I have a piece of beef, and I'm going to see if I can get this to where you can see it. You see that? So this is a piece of beef bottom round. So it actually comes from the leg of the cow, and it's just like a little piece on the inside of the thigh, like right here. And the reason this is really good for roasts and for cured cuts is because it's like a pretty tough-ish, like relatively tough piece of meat that's not going to be great like thrown on the grill. So this is the kind of cut that's used for like curing, smoking. You can braise it or slow roast it, but it's great for making roasts and sandwich meat out of. The other reason it's important to think about using a cut like this, like eye of round or bottom round, is because it's a cut that is a little bit harder for farmers to sell. Because it is relatively tougher, it's not flying off the shelves like a ribeye or a filet mignon, so we're really helping our local producers and farmers if we understand how to use cuts like this. So this is a cut that is about 2.5 pounds, and if you're on the metric system, that would be around 1,134 grams. I'm giving it to you in the smallest unit because we're going to need that for our meat math, which is a super fun little activity we're going to do together. Right? So basically you have two options with this piece of meat. If you wanted to make like a dry salted, like really herby, delicious roast beef, all you would need to do is weigh this piece of meat, which I've already done for you, and then you need to calculate 2.5% salt to the weight of the meat. And when I say salt, I'm talking sea salt or kosher salt. Again, we want to limit as many additives, anti-caking agents, chemical agents as possible. So you are going to try to get your hands on some sea salt or kosher salt, and you're going to do some meat math to figure out how much salt you need. So in order to do that, you're doing basically a decimal figuration. So you're reaching back to that lower school math. And if you're a homeschooler, this is a great activity to do with your kiddos because it teaches them these decimal conversions and these percent conversions. So to figure out 2.5% salt to the weight of this meat, I'm going to take 1,134 grams times 0.025. And that is going to give me 28 grams of salt. And that feels like a lot, I know. But you have to remember that this is just for the curing portion of this. It's just taking water out of the meat because salt has that awesome chemical property that sucks water out of things. It's not actually like, you're not going to be eating all of that salt. So don't be freaked out by the quantity up front. Just know, oh, I've got my 2.5% and that's what I need in order to cure or draw down the moisture content of this piece of meat. So you're going to take that salt and any other herbs you want and just rub it on the piece of meat. Rub it all over, and then refrigerate it for like 3 days for this cut. Generally, I say 1.5 days per pound if you're using imperial measurements, and 3 days per kilo if you're using the metric system. That's what you want to do if you're like dry salt curing, like I said. Once you get that 3 days out of the way, you're going to take that piece of meat out. You're going to rinse all that salt off of it, and then get it as dry as possible, and then throw it in the oven and roast it. Simple, easy. I do like 400 degrees Fahrenheit, that's like 204 Celsius, until the internal temperature of the roast with the meat thermometer is around like 135. Because I like it a little bit pink in the center, but if you want it to be more done, you just take it all the way to like 145. That would be like 57 Celsius if you're on the metric system. So that's the simple form of salt curing. Can you believe how easy it is? It's literally just making that calculation, 2.5% salt with your herbs, rubbing it on the meat, letting it sit 3 days, rinsing it off, and roasting it. And then once it's cooled after cooking, you can slice it super thin with a knife or like a meat slicer, and you will have, from a 2.5 pound roast, you'll have a decent amount of sliced meat for your family going into the week, or you can even have it for dinner that night. So now that we've sort of talked through that easy dry curing thing, I wanted to talk to you about how to make like a corned beef. especially because I'm going to do it with some leftover pickle brine that I have for making fermented pickles, because I feel like this is a really great way of like recycling ingredients and using some of my like good probiotic fermented brine for making the meat. And so basically what I have is, and if you don't know what corned beef is, it's basically just like, it's cured meat, just like I was talking about, but it's made in like a wet brine instead of a dry salt cure. So this is my leftover, like literally there might still be some dill pickles in this. I just fermented some dill pickles. They're gone now. There's some garlic in there. And I'm like, oh, you know, I have like 650 milliliters of this. And when you're making corned beef, you're actually relating your salt to the amount of liquid or water that it takes to cover the meat instead of the weight of the meat itself. So I do 5 to 8% salt to the weight of water. So I just figured out like, okay, how much water does it take me to cover this? Turns out it was about 2,000 milliliters or 2 liters. And so I was like, I did my little math, like, okay, I want 5% salt. I do 2,000 times 0.05. Or if I wanted 8%, it would be 2,000 times 0.08. So pretty simple. And then you would just dissolve that salt in the water. If you have to, you usually don't have to heat the water up. You can just like vigorously mix the salt into the water and it will dissolve. And that's important because you don't want the brine to be like hot when you put the meat into it because it'll cook the outside proteins. You want it to be like room temperature or cool. But in this case, I'm using my leftover pickle brine. So I had to do a little extra math, which is super fun for me. I'm gonna make you love math here, believe me. And your homeschoolers. Like if let me see my face for the math part. Like if I know that this pickle brine is 3% salt, because I like to make my dill pickles at 3%, then I have to like take this amount of liquid and amount of salt out of the total amount of water and salt that I need. Does that make sense? Am I like tracking here, Dawn? Okay, so yep. All I did was like, okay, I measure this brine. I know that it's 650 milliliters, and for that to be 3% salt means that it has 20 grams of salt in it. So all I have to do is take 650 milliliters of water out of my 2,000 that I needed to cover the meat, and 20 grams of salt out of the total that I needed to get to a 5% to 8% quantity of salt in my water. So that's really all I did. Like I just did the base calculation of like, okay, it takes me 2,000 milliliters of water. I need 5 to 8% salt. That turns out to be 100 to 160 grams. But I take 2,000 minus 650 because I'm using the brine. And then I take 160 grams minus 20 because I know there's already 20 grams in here. And then that leaves me with 1,350 milliliters of water that I still need, and 140 grams of salt that I still need. And so I have that
Meredith
here. Yep.
What if I've bought bubbies? If I've bought something, and bubbies is a real common one you find in the store that's properly fermented just with salt and water, and I've eaten the pickles out and I've got the brine. How comparable is that to you like to be at 3%? What do you think a typical brine like that is likely at?
Gosh, Kirsten might be a better one to know that. It's hard to calculate from the jar because they usually include sodium, and sodium is just a component of regular table salt. It's not equivalent. So you can either try to calculate it, or you can just say, all right, I'm going to cheat this up a little bit. That's what I would do, is to be like, instead of targeting a 5% brine, I'm going to target an 8% brine, and I'm going to assume that my bubbies is at like a 2 to 3%. I mean, that's really
yeah, commercially it's pickles are 3 to 5%.
3 to 5.
Okay. I know as somebody who loves the idea of saving, I eat the pickles out of the jar if I buy it commercially, and I'm always looking at that brine thinking, I don't want to just throw that away. I want to reuse it. And I know I could put vegetables back in, but knowing that I could put it over meat is another really cool
So I want to
aspect.
interject here too. It's really important that to do what we're talking about here, that you're using a live brine, a live pickle. So many of the pickles out there are found on the grocery store shelves. If it's on a shelf and it's shelf stable, it's not going to be a live fermented, lacto-fermented brine. I could go into the whole process, and actually, you know, even those Clausen pickles, pickle chips or whatever, have fermentation in their process way back somewhere, but we won't go into that. The important part is if you want to use pickle brine, Bubby's pickle brine, or your local producer, you want to make sure that you've gotten it in the refrigerated section of your market. It should be in the refrigerator. So we can talk more about that in a bit, but just wanted to interject. And I don't know, Meredith, I've got like some pickles in front of me that are also different. Like these are spring radishes. This is some really pretty hot peppers. I've even got lacto-fermented corn pickles.
Awesome.
And I feel like
brine.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to check. As I feel like you could probably, like if you want your meat spicy and you use these ahi crystal brine, you're going to get some amazing flavors that way.
Totally. Like something like a radish might give it like a weird flavor, you know, because radishes have that weird gassy flavor sometimes, but certainly like spicy flavors. The thing to remember, and this is another reason, like if the salt quantity is still freaking you out, when you're floating meat in some kind of water like this, like a brine, it's only that, like the record shows that it's only picking up about 10% of what is in there. And that's why it's important to have these elevated flavors and these elevated salt quantities, because what you're really trying to do is convince the water to come out of the cells of the meat. That's the process of curing. We won't go into the science of why that's happening. Just believe me, it's happening via osmosis. And so basically all I'm doing is like, I have this piece of meat, better if it's like at room temperature or semi-cold, but it doesn't matter, it'll just be cold. Trim it up if you feel like it, and then I'm just putting it into a bowl. And then I'm just gonna dump. This is like a heck of a demo. I'm doing dumping things in. It's not very Bill Nye. But basically, I'm gonna dump in my extra salted water. So I put the extra salt into this and just stirred it around to dissolve it. And then I'm going to dump in my brine. Oh, there went some pickles that were still in it. And so I'm just going to make sure it's completely submerged. Sometimes you'll have to put like a little plate on top of it just to make sure the meat doesn't float to the top of the brine. And then I'm going to cover it up like a towel or something. And I'm going to stick it into my refrigerator. Definitely needs to be in the fridge. And I'm going to leave this in here for 3 days. You can leave it longer, you can leave it shorter, especially the saltier it is, the faster it goes. And as you do this, you're going to kind of learn like, what do I like? What does my family prefer in terms of like how strong the flavors are? But what I would say is to get it where you want it, you need at least 3 days for a cut that is like small like this, like 2 pounds. And so what you can do is go in each day and flip it over inside of the brine. That just mixes all the ingredients up better and also makes sure that you're getting like an even cure on all sides of the meat. Sometimes if it's like little pieces of it sticking up out of the water and it doesn't get flipped over, you'll get these weird like parts that aren't quite uniform and don't take on the salt and don't take on the flavors as evenly. So flipping it over is a good practice. And then just like I said with the dry cured one, when you're finished with that 3 days, you want to get it out of the cure, which in this case is going to be the brine, and you want to get it as dry as possible. That's because you don't get good browning reactions on wet food. So if you're going to move it onto a smoker or you're going to put it into the oven and roast it, you want to make sure it's really dry. In the case of traditional corned beef, it's actually boiled. So you don't have to worry so much about getting it rinsed off. You're just going to plop it into some boiling water and let it roll until the meat is cooked. And the degree to which it's cooked is completely up to you. If you like it to be a little bit pink in the middle, you're obviously not going to take it all the way up. You're going to stop it around 57 Celsius or like 135 Fahrenheit. But again, that's totally subjective. And so obviously for a sandwich cut, you're going to want to cool it once it's cooked. Let it rest. That allows all the moisture to redistribute itself really well in the meat. And then you're going to go ahead and slice it perpendicular to the grain of the meat. Anytime you're slicing meat, slice it perpendicular to the grain of the mussel. That's going to be easier for you to chew through. Slice it as thin as you possibly can, and then you can go ahead and like arrange it on some wax paper or parchment, and then wrap it up and put it in your fridge. And you should be able to keep it there for like a week to 10 days, maybe a little bit longer even, before you want to take portions of it and stick it into the freezer to keep it even longer. So that's that. Any questions or things I forgot, Kirsten?
I don't think so. You're making me hungry.
I know. I know. I'm ready. I want to head out to the kitchen right now. Just to be sure, when you poured the water over, that was brine. So you had already mixed the salt in the water, correct?
Yeah, because I didn't want a bunch of like think, 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 think going on while I was doing the demo of me stirring. So I figured better to do it in advance.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing you can do, Dawn, like you were talking about your bubbies or whatever, like you can just use that to tenderize meat and flavor it before cooking it like same day. And that is a good use of, that's actually why Chick-fil-A is like so good or whatever, why everyone loves it, is because they brine their chicken in pickle juice. In addition
Oh,
to
nice.
That's a fun fact.
yeah, so you can use any kind of like cultured liquid like buttermilk or pickle juice to make meat really, really yummy and tender and juicy right before cooking it, and not for curing purposes.
Awesome. Great tip. Thank you.
Sure. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about sourcing, or did you want to talk about pickles some more?
I was just going to talk about making your own at some point, which can come with the sourcing, or I could go for it right now since we're in demo mode.
Yeah, let's go for the demo, and then we can talk about sourcing.
Okay, so I'm not actually going to demo because really all you'd be doing is watching me chop, chop, chop. But I do want to say that, you know, this is super easy. Here's what you're going to need to make your own, let's just say sauerkraut, but you're going to need a bowl. Most people have one. You're going to need a knife. You're going to need a cutting board. And these are cute little baby cabbages. And you're going to need some cabbage and some salt and a jar. And really that's it. And I just want to talk about how accessible that is to everyone. I mean, there's no special equipment, there's no special anything. You're going to do some math, just like with the meat, but your scale is wonderful. That's true. That's true. So, and that also depends on your style. So if you have a scale, you're going to do some math. For average sauerkraut in the average northern hemisphere climate, not getting into the subtropical, but kind of where most of us live, it's going to be a 1.5% salt, so much lower. The same math, you're going to measure your cabbage and do your measurements with 0.015, and that will give you your grams of salt. But if you're an intuitive cook or don't have a scale and you just have some cabbages sitting in your refrigerator right now and want to get started, you're going to slice it up real thin. You're going to put it in your bowl, and it's about a tablespoon of salt for 3 pounds of cabbage is kind of what you're going to have in your head. But what I do is I put a little salt in and I squish, squish, squish. You're going to start seeing that brine release. And at that point, I taste it. And you want it to taste like a pleasing salt. You want to know that the salt is there, and it's that kind of salt you want to keep eating. So think of a chip. And if you taste the salt in sort of that way, you know that your salt is good. Unlike meat, vegetables, you've got so much more leeway. You can really tailor it. The salt is there for helping inhibit any microbes that we don't want to encourage and give the lactobacillus sort of a head start. But it's not as critical as it is in meat in the way that it needs to, pull out that moisture. And so you've got this incredible leeway of salt. And so that's why it's a really great way to get started, even intuitively. So yeah, then you're going to press all that in your jar and basically put a lid on it. And every day you're going to kind of give it a little twist. You're going to see that CO2 release and then close, or not, you're going to not see it release. You're going to hear it release. And you're going to close that lid back up. And what's cool is that top of your ferment is where if something wants to go wrong, like yeast or mold or something that has access, needs oxygen, wants to grow, it will be on the top. But with this, once you're doing that, CO2 is heavier than oxygen, and those first few burps, you're getting that oxygen out of that jar, and that CO2 is going to keep it really nice and safe in there. Yeah, and you can start tasting it after a couple of days. You're going to see that color kind of shift from that fresh greenish look to more this kind of cooked yellow look. So that's the down and dirty quick version of.
Nice.
And did you say a tablespoon to a quart jar? Roughly?
To about 3 pounds, and 3 pounds is going to be
3 pounds.
more. Mm-hmm.
But you can keep tasting it. I like that. I think people get married to, oh my gosh, I have to be so precise with this measurement and this measurement. I love the idea that you can really sort of taste your way through that. If it tastes salty to where you like it, then it's enough.
Sure. And the other thing
so-
is, people that have canned know that the recipes are very strict. Like if you're making salsa, you can only use this much onion, this much garlic, this much herb, and because you're adding the acid, and you have to keep that acid level just so. But with something like this, if you have extra garlic or carrot in your fridge, I mean, you can put all that in. I like to say that the microbes are equal opportunity starch eaters. They don't care if it's carrot sugar or if it's cabbage sugar or if it's, tomato sugar. They're going to consume it and turn it into that acid, and it's really the acid that does the preservation.
I love too that you've got a canning jar. You can get that at any grocery store. It's really easy to find. I didn't see any special airlock or weights or anything going on in what you put there, which obviously those are fun things and can be used, but you're showing something that get a canning jar and a lid, salt and a vegetable, and you're good to go, right?
Exactly. I mean, if you think about fermentation, humans have been doing this for a very, very long time. Before there were canning jars, before there were jars, you need a vessel and some salt and a vegetable, and really, that's it. And if that, and that time, these are, as we talked about in the first part, these are nutrient dense foods. You're not going to use what you make in all one meal, and so you're making something that's going to take you maybe 10 minutes to set up. The little billions of little microbial chefs in there are going to transform it for you, make it delicious, do all the work, and then you're going to stick it into your refrigerator and use it as needed. And so that's the other piece, is actually this is a very quick convenience food, just like the lunch meat. And you throw this sauerkraut on with that corned beef that you made, and you're going to have, just delicious on delicious.
Yeah.
Sandwich that is out of this world and unique to your household.
Yeah,
100%.
I'm pretty excited for you. I think that we should talk about sourcing, because I know that was a big thing.
Yeah, please.
I think for meat, this comes up a lot, is people are always like, well, how do you make sure that you're getting good meat? And what I like to say is any time you can come by your food through relationship with people who grow it or raise the animals, that's the best case scenario. If you can shake the hand of the person who raised it, and you can ask them questions in a kind way about their kind, non-judgmental way about their
Non-judgmental.
Yeah. Then, that's the best bet. The next level is inevitably going to be, well, you could be going through somebody who's in a relationship. Like I get raw milk from somebody who organizes a group of us to get the milk. But so I don't ever interact with the farmer, but she does, and I trust her, and that works for me too. And so you can get hooked up with groups like that online. Definitely, it's okay to just post on your social media like, hey, I'm looking to get closer to my food. Does anyone that I know have tips on this? Does anybody that I know like have a buying club or a website? If you're totally in the dark and you know that none of your people are, in this little revolution with you, that's fine. You can go to sites like localharvest.org, which will allow you to start searching for where are the farms in my area or somewhat close to me. You can try to find a local farmers market, get in there and start meeting the producers, stuff like that. If you can't do any of those things, or you're like, please, oh please, I'm so busy, I am not going to do all of those things, that's fine. You're probably going to be starting to rely on label claims at the store. And that is really common. I definitely want to be 100% transparent with you that the more you have to rely on label claims, the less there is a chance that you're getting a high quality product, either in terms of nutrient density, in terms of animal welfare, or in terms of ensuring that it doesn't have some kind of like harmful hormones or antibiotics in it. And that's simply because it doesn't mean that every farmer who labels their product is a bad farmer or whatever. It's just like, it's the way that we have of organizing information. And a lot of those terms are starting to be co-opted by the bigger corporate food producers and processors, because they know that that's the kind of food consumers want now. They want clean food, and people are waking up to this stuff. And so it gets really confusing when you get into label claims, because you'll be like, okay, well, I see certified, humane, raised, and handled, and I see animal welfare approved. Which one is better? Which one is right? And we don't have time to go into that, but basically, like in my book, The Ethical Meat Handbook, I kind of cover like, here are the things that actually have to happen for someone to get that certification. Do they have to pass the test 100%, or do they only have to get a 60? Is it third-party verified? Is it not? Is it run by Monsanto or is it run by a grassroots community coalition? There's lots of factors involved. But what I would say with meat is like the labels that are good are 100% grass-fed, American grass-fed certified, definitely animal welfare approved, and definitely no hormones and antibiotics are the label claims that you want to look for. If you're concerned about genetically modified feeds, you're going to also want to look for a certified organic label on the meat. So that's a whole lot of them, but that's the tips that I have for sourcing at this point. And I have resources obviously on my website, and there's a free ebook available through my Instagram and my website called Ethical Meat: The Basics, that'll sort of help you like start moving down this road if this is all feeling overwhelming.
Awesome. And you mentioned Applegate, that sometimes that's your compromise food that you can grab when you need more time.
Yeah.
And it's what's available in Ohio. We can get a hold of that at Whole Foods. You can't get it at Kroger or someplace. They get harder. Well, that's not true. They have them in packaging. They just don't have them in a deli. Sometimes you have to find places where you're compromising, and something like that is a great way to give yourself space to make maybe 1 or 2 meals a month where you actually did the salt brine, or you cured a meat, as you're starting to learn, because we can't do it all at once.
Totally.
But man, it definitely seems a lot more approachable to me watching you do that.
Well, good.
Kirsten, what about you? Do you have suggestions for the starter?
Well, sourcing is, a lot of the same ideas. Find your farmer's market. I would add, at least in our area, there's, the extension agents at the university extension offices. They know a lot. They know who's out there doing the farm stuff. So that's another way to connect. If you like growing your own vegetables, it's a really lovely way to know that your source is clean. And again, extension offices often have master gardener programs and just lots of resources. I know that's like kind of on the, you know, overachiever scale of sourcing, but it's something to think about because gardening also has, you know, so many other benefits. I was listening to a podcast yesterday and it was just talking about even the exercise of gardening is so beneficial for your health, and that movement, you know, with being outside, with, you know, the connectivity with the ground and the plants. And anyway, yes, that's another way. When you go to the farmer's market, obviously you're going to find fresh local vegetables, but in many cases there are a lot of farms that are starting to use fermentation as a way to take care of their overages, take care of their seconds in a way that they can value add and also extend the life of that vegetable so that they're not throwing as much into the compost pile or whatever. So it's really great, especially if you don't feel like you have the space to ferment your own vegetables, to find your local farmer, because you're really helping with that local economy and helping that farmer in another way to sell their vegetables and get some income. Locally, you know, it's a really great off-season thing for our farmers because in the winter they've got these vegetables from the summer that were preserved at the peak of nutrient and freshness, and it's another way for them to continue to extend the season on their employees, which is actually a huge thing. Keep those employees longer and employed. So lots of ways that buying your fermented vegetables will help a local farmer. If that is not an option, again, it's about reading the labels, but the most important thing is just heading to the refrigerator section. You know, here's a local one I found the other day in prep for this. You know, the important word here is keep refrigerated, and it's in the refrigerator section. A lot of times, you know, you'll see a little label across the top that might say alive and effervescent or something like that. That's what you're looking for. And if you open it up and it bubbles, like, don't be worried. That's not bad. It means it is alive and effervescent. Yeah. So, you know, this one has not fermented in plastic, certified awesome, slow fermentation, 4+ weeks, plant-based, live food, probiotic. I mean, they've got it all on here, but really it's vegetables and salt and nothing else is added. So that's what you're looking for in your ferments.
Yeah, I often tell people that they want to turn the jar over and look for ingredients that don't include vinegar. And I usually tell them it's not that vinegar's bad, it's that vinegar's a shortcut to that beautiful sour flavor, and it's not going to have the presence of the living stuff there. So water, salt, vegetable, seasonings.
So you said turn the jar over, and the other fun thing is, like, when you turn this jar over, you can kind of see it, and I think is there's a little white around the edges, and that's sediment that comes from the lacto fermentation process. Same within the pickles. You know, this is beautiful and clear, but look at that sediment in the bottom, and, you know, like bubbies, you know, when you shake them up and you get that cloudy brine, that means you got the good stuff.
It's alive. Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
I mean,
Well, yeah, go.
I was just going to say that was a lot, and I wanted to say that the fermentation school has all that and more, and you can, most of our classes are pre-recorded. We do live webinars and stuff. We have some free offerings to get your foot in the door. If you sign up on the website, you get a free mini course to get you started fermenting. But most of our classes are pre-recorded, so you can totally take your time, go at your own pace, and you get lifetime access, so you can watch as much as you need to in order to get the concepts down. And we're actually offering a coupon, aren't we, for the folks at the summit? And
Yeah.
will it be in like the notes, Don? Because I don't remember what the coupon code is.
Yep. So the folks that are watching today, or if they have long all the access, they're going to be able to access their website that has all of your offers on it, and
Okay.
so all the speakers have offers that people will be able to access. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm so inspired. I want to go to the kitchen right now. I know I have a son that loves meat. And I know standing in front of a deli counter is usually a really stressful thing for me because I want to source something that I know is not filled with junk. And that goes all the way back to an animal that was raised respectfully and isn't clogged with all of the nastiness that we've done to the animals. So when I need to put lunch meat, we do a lot of eggs on the farm, but this is really inspiring to me to think, wow, I could actually have the easy grab lunch meat and then a ferment that goes on that to make a delicious sandwich for the flavor and also all the health benefits. So people can come to my membership to learn. You guys are talking about flavor a lot. I talk a lot about what this does for digestive health. And they can go deeper, deeper, deeper from my membership, and the opportunity to go deeper, deeper with you guys into this is just the tippy top. This is just a couple easy things that you can do when you get into this world. Gosh, the limit is just up to your creativity and what you want to play with. It's all play.
Totally. We really appreciate you having us, Dawn.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
thanks
you.
so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. And I look forward to. I'm going to be checking out more of your stuff now. I've checked out some things, but I'm really excited about the meat. So thanks,
Awesome.
guys, for being here, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thank you.